Hey, all my Crimsonites, and welcome to the Crimson Cure channel, where we embrace our femininity, increase our womanly value, and celebrate our brothers. So join me on our feminine journey to learn, heal, and grow. Hey, everybody. Hey, how is everyone doing? How's all my Crimsonites doing? I hope everyone is doing well. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear and see us clearly, because we don't want any issues as we have this conversation. Got a 1. We got some 1s in the chat. Okay. That's awesome. So as you can see, we have Mr. Dennis Spurling, aka the Blizzard King, in the house with us today. I want everyone to welcome him warmly. I also would like for my mods to put his link to his channel in the chat room. So for all of you who are not subscribed to him, I don't know what you're doing. You need to go over there and subscribe to Brother Dennis's channel. How you doing today, Brother Dennis?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you.
As no problem. I'm going to be real straight. I'm probably going to do a lot more listening than I'm doing talking in this particular conversation, just because I feel that you are more researched in this topic than I am. But what I wanted to do, how I wanted to start this off, was just sort of clarifying terms, I guess, at least my understanding of these terms, FBA and ADOS. So my understanding of these terms, and I can stand to be corrected if I need to be, FBA, Foundational Black American, would be the Black people who are indigenous to this land, who were here prior to the transatlantic slave trade, who lived on this land and occupied all of North America and what we call today the United States of America. That would be my understanding of FBA. My understanding of ADOS, American descendants of slaves or African descendants of slaves, would be the Black people that are here as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Would that be accurate in your opinion?
So first, just thank you again for having me here. And I would first say that I didn't invent those terms. There's a gentleman named Tariq Nasheed. He's a historian. I'm sure most of your audience knows about him. He came up with the term foundational Black American. There are some other folks. I believe the gentleman's name is Tone Talks, and I forget the other lady's name, but they came up with the term ADOS, or American Descendants of Slaves. Now, yes, that Carnell. I believe that's now. The thing is, and many know this, but my background is as an attorney. I've been a practicing attorney for 25 years. My education is that I have a bachelor's degree in biology, a JD, which is a Juris Doctorate in law, and also an LLM in environmental law, which means that I'm qualified to teach law school. The thing in one of the main principles they teach you, and I'm getting around to what you're asking. Just let me let me lay the foundation.
I'm letting you go.
Yeah. So when I speak about terms, words, each word that you use has meaning in the law. If there is a statute written, it says that, let's say battery, the intentional use of force or harm against the person of another, that all those terms mean something. And so when I look at the term ADOS, American Descendant of Slave, okay, I'm going to break down each one of those terms. American descendant of slaves. That in effect could be white people who have, largely in the United States, have up to 18% sub-Saharan African who are descended from slaves. So technically, there are white people who are ADOS. If you're an American descendant of slave, you could technically be from, you could be a white passing person, a black person who knows that they have black heritage, but on their birth certificate it says white or Caucasian, and so they too could be American descendants of slaves. Foundational Black American, when I look at that term, and look, I understand that the originators of these terms have meaning, but when I look at them from the perspective of an attorney, and I've used the term foundational Black American in some of my legal briefs, because I want it to be codified in the law, because that's how we are able to keep things there, and that's how the society changes. We're a nation of laws, not just individuals and opinions, and not necessarily personalities. We got away from that when this country separated itself from the King of England and their royalty. So when I look at the term foundational Black American, I understand the term I understand Black American. That's pretty clear. That basically people who can trace their heritage back to 1860. That's what it originally meant before there was such a large population of immigrants who came to this country after 1860, after 1965. And the reason that is important, because there was a ban banning basically people of color, whether they be Asian, African, Caribbean, from coming to this country up until 1965, which is when we did away with those racist laws that prohibited the influx or lawful migration of people of color from other countries. Prior to 1965, there was less than 1% African people, 50,000 specific. There were 50,000 people of African descent straight from the motherland in this country. There was less than 1% Asian. I believe that the Latino population was under 3%. It wasn't until after 1965 that all these folks from these other countries began to come. And if you will notice, maybe around the 1980s is when they really start coming. And now we're in second, third generation Africans, Caribbeans, et cetera. And of course, there's always been migration. But and I say all that to say there was never a need for us to delineate before, because this country was simply Black and white. It was majority white people descended from Europe, and people who could trace their heritage back to slavery. Now, here's the thing. We know how intermingling works. I will say that if we look at the history of the African voyages, specifically Abubakar II, and I'm not necessarily certain if you're familiar with this, but there was an African, West African king from Mali, okay? We'll call him a king. Abubakar II allegedly traveled to this country, traveled to the New World in 1311 or 1312 with hundreds of ships. They landed on the coast of Brazil. They worked their way up to the Dominican Republic. And there was, the reason we know about this is because Mansa Musa, who was his successor, when he traveled from Mali all the way to do his Hajj, he stopped off in Egypt and he spoke with a Muslim historian he noted that he said that his predecessor went to sailed across the Ethiopian Sea and went to what was the New World and never came back. And so when you speak to the Tainos, even 1492, when Columbus got lost, and let me say, when Columbus discovered the Dominican Republic,
right,
he met up with the Tainos, and he said that, yeah, there's been Black sailors who've been coming here from the south and southwest or southeast for a long time, and they even had metals that would not be found other than on the west coast of Africa. So we know that there are Africans who've been traveling to the New World since at least the 13th century or 14th century technically. Right. Now, as far as the Asians who traveled across the Bering Straits about several thousand years ago, which we call Native Americans, they too are immigrants in that regard. But we also understand that there have been people who we call South Pacific Islanders who got lost on the Pacific Ocean. And when you start looking at the genetic complexity of what we refer to as Native Americans, whether we're talking about from Alaska all the way down to the tip of South America. It is very diverse. So in this regard, we have to admit that there's been an African presence in what we call the New World for a millennium. Okay. And so, of course, if there are African people on this country, in this land, we have to acknowledge that they were here before the founding of this country. Now, of course, those people would intermix with those who came in the bellies of ships during the slave trade, of course. And so you may be someone who is of African descent, both from the small percentage of people who were here before Europeans came, and also because of the Africans who were here because of the transatlantic slave trade. And there's really no way to get around that. And I think it's disingenuous for any scholar to say, "Oh, I'm solely the offspring or child or product of people who were never slaves." That's just disingenuous, considering the intermixture that's gone on between Black people. We, as you know, we don't necessarily we don't have class differentials in the Black community. You could be a police officer having dinner with your cousin who just got out the penitentiary, and then you got another cousin who's an engineer, and another cousin who is who's a booster. You see, we don't necessarily differentiate in our culture. We don't class stratify. We don't separate ourselves by class like a lot of other ethnic groups do, because we don't have the luxury of doing that, because there's such a small percentage of us in this country, relatively speaking, and we know we have to stick together. That being the case, a Black man who's a millionaire could marry a Black woman who comes from poverty. Likewise, a Black woman who's highly educated can marry what we often call a Pookie or a Ray Ray, or reproduce with those children. So invariably, there's going to be a mixture of people who have slave descent, people who can trace their lineage back to before 1619, when Africans were here before the Pilgrims, and so on and so forth. So, again, when I talk about foundational Black Americans, I'm acknowledging the fact that we were here before the first Europeans were here, but I'm also acknowledging that we're descendants of slaves. So I guess what I'm trying to explain to you is that you can be a foundational Black American and also be an ADOS, but you're not necessarily ADOS. You're not necessarily foundational Black American just because you're ADOS. You see? Mm-hmm. So I like the term FBA better, because it's all inclusive. It's something, when I begin to look at these terminologies, if I'm looking at it as an attorney and it's a statute that says these reparations are designated solely for foundational Black Americans, I can look into that term and I can understand what the authors meant. I can understand what the legislator meant. So it's a more technical term. It's not so loose. It makes sense. And that's why I, as an attorney, prefer that term FBA as opposed to ADOS. Yeah.
Okay. And I appreciate you giving us a comprehensive scope of these terms from a legal perspective, not just from an emotional or even a cultural perspective, right, but based in the law, which of these terms would actually benefit us more, right, from a legal sense. You said something in there that I wanted to speak to, and I'm glad that you said it. You were saying that essentially, historically and culturally, we as Black people here, we've never had to really delineate. Mm-hmm. There was never any real reason that presented itself culturally or societally, because, like you said, at one point this country was just black and white. Right, it was black and white. We knew who was who. If you wasn't white, we knew who was what. And so with that being said, I can speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for nobody else. Mm-hmm. Here in 2025, I almost feel a little funny actually doing it, because culturally we never did it. Not really. And I think that us delineating now has thrown a lot of people off. Like it's thrown a lot of people off, and which is the heart of what I wanted to talk about, because we're doing it, it is now seen as divisive.
Right.
Or, you know, American blacks, and I'm just going to use that term, FBA or American blacks, are somehow now not liking, hating, or trying to discriminate against like African immigrants or melanated people from other regions or from across the diaspora that come here to America. And here's my thing. Seeing how we never really historically had to delineate, what changed? Why is it important in 2025 going forward for us to now start delineating and being more serious about that?
Okay. So there's twofold. Number one, cultural reasons. Number two, access to opportunities, finance, and politics. And so let me deal with that part first, because I think you understand why culturally we would want to delineate, just because we have different cultures. And most of the people from the African continent and the Caribbean will acknowledge that. And I'll say this before I go too far. We as foundational Black Americans, or we as Black Americans, live in a unique position compared to them, in that we are surrounded by people who are not Black. Whereas in their countries, they, for the most part, are the dominant ethnic group, whether you're talking about Gabon, Nigeria, or Jamaica, they're all Black people. But here in the United States, we are, they say 13% of the population, but when you actually look at the numbers, 25% of those folks who are considered Black American, or who are housed in that 13%, are first generation African Caribbeans or the descendants thereof. So remove that 25%, and Black Americans, or foundational Black Americans, comprise approximately 9% of the Black American population. And that number is shrinking over the years because of intermixture, et cetera, et cetera. But if we want to talk about resources, why it's important to delineate, a few years back, I looked at the Howard University medical school student enrollment. And it was easy for me to determine that the vast majority of those students who were considered Black students were of African descent. And I can tell by simply looking at their last names. So again, Howard University was originally a historically Black university. It was designed and created for the children of foundational Black Americans, specifically in the case of Howard University. It was the only university that started off as a university, and literally the slave owners' children attended Howard University. They would send them out of wherever they were, Mississippi, Alabama, and they would send them up to DC to be educated. And nevertheless, it was a historically Black college, and it was founded for foundational Black Americans. But now we have people who can say, yeah, I'm an African American or I'm a Black American, but they don't have that same heritage or culture that we have. They cannot trace their roots back to 1860 in the census. They don't have, they're basically new immigrants who came to this country, who are masking themselves as foundational Black America, or masking themselves as Black Americans, and they're utilizing resources that were originally designated for Black Americans. For instance, we had this whole thing about the revocation of DEI and affirmative action. Now, again, that was supposed to be those programs, those set-asides were to help remediate the hundreds of years of oppression that we had to deal with. Can you imagine, had we kept that 1865 or 1965 law off the books, and Black people, brown people, Asian people were banned, as they were, from coming to this country? Imagine how many Harvard and Yale graduates we would have who are foundational Black American. Imagine what that would do. Yeah, okay, maybe they weren't necessarily qualified as some of the white children. But remember, these are people who are fresh off the plantation, whose parents spoke what we call Black vernacular or Ebonics. So of course they wouldn't have that built-in level of knowledge and education that these white folks have. But at some point, after generation and generation of Harvard students and Yale students and Brown students, foundational Black Americans will be far better than we are right now, is what I'm saying. Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't made a lot of progress, but that whole point was for us to be able to benefit because we had been purposely and systematically held back. But instead of us, and when I say us, I'm talking about foundational Black Americans, instead of us being allowed to utilize something that our ancestors fought for through the 80s and 90s and 2000s and 2020s and all the way up until now, other people who come from other countries have jumped in front. There was a study, a New York Times article that came out about 10 years ago that said Harvard University's administration realized we don't even have to deal with foundational Black Americans. We can just replace them with Nigerians. We could just bring the Nigerians over and replace them. They're a lot easier to deal with. They don't have the historical baggage associated with that Black Americans have. And, you know, they'll do what we say do. And so this was purposely done. You know, it's a way in which to get around what was something that was rightfully ours. So now by delineating, but now on that application says, yeah, are you African American? Are you foundational Black American? Are you Caribbean American? And now they have to explain specifically who they are on those applications under penalty of fraud and other bad things that can happen to them. So when it comes to resources, it makes sense, since resources are finite, it makes sense for those resources that are set aside for Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, to be utilized for Black Americans. You and I speak about this earlier. I have 3 sons, and I want my sons to be able to utilize the things that I've worked hard for and the things that my ancestors have worked hard for. I don't want people who have their own country, their own governments, their own ancestors, their own resources to come to my country, jump ahead of the line of my children and utilize resources that we fought for. So that, as a practical matter, for the purposes of resources and finance, and there's one aspect. Now, for another thing, and this is going to be one that might hit home for some people, the only cultural group that has been able to survive the onslaught of, I think you call it white survivalism, has been foundational Black Americans. Not only have we succeeded, but we've also thrived under this. You see, because we have a very unique culture. It was born of fire. It was born of necessity. I know you, like many of us who studied the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his teachings, and he explained why we ate pork and why we ate chitlins, which they didn't call chitlins. It started with an S. But we did that not because we liked it. We turned that slop into soul food because we had to use it to survive. We needed what we needed. That we took the toughest part of the greens and we made it work. We took the hog maws. Most people don't know what a hog maw is. We took a hog's head and boiled it down and put some seasoning on it. And, you know, our grandmothers ate it with some light, all that, you know, stuff that you should
pig ears, pig feet.
You should run away from it these days. If you see it anywhere near you, you should run away. But the bottom line is, even our music was a way to humanize ourselves. The blues, to let them know, hey, we're not these animals that you say we are. Look at our art. Look at the way we dance. Look at how we sing from our soul. This was all born of fire. It was all born of the atrocities that's exactly right. And so everything, even the way we talk, I was speaking the other day and I explained the cookout. We don't invite everybody to the cookout because we've learned that inviting everybody to the cookout means that people know what you have, they know what you hold, and oftentimes the dominant society will become jealous of you and they will do things to you. We learned that in Colfax, Louisiana. We learned that in Rosewood. We learned that in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it seems Black progress invites white rage. And so because of that, we know well enough to know to be quiet. And this is why our culture has survived the onslaught. We've survived chattel slavery. We survived the Negro codes, the Jim Crow. We survived the war on us, which they call the war on drugs. We survived the HIV epidemic. We survived. Now we're dealing with the gender war, and we're dealing with and the gender war is not just about gender. It's about trying to confuse your children on what gender they are. And we're having to deal with this. They've thrown everything they could at us, and we still survive, largely because we don't have a sellout culture, largely because we typically address those individuals in our community who are willing to sell out. Whereas you look at African culture, and we can refer back to the daughters of the trade, they literally mechanized and culturalized the European slave trade. And I'm going to argue that but for their participation in the transatlantic slave trade, colonization would have never happened, because those Europeans would not have had a foothold on the west coast of Africa. The typical European would only last at most a year on the west coast of Africa without help. But because these women married into these, they saw monetary opportunity, and they married into it, and they took advantage of it. And so, again, culturally speaking, it's important that foundational Black American culture survive, because we've adapted as a group of Black people to exist in this country. If we had Caribbeans and Africans take over and they were the dominant culture, what we consider the Black American community in this country would not survive. It's evident by the fact that, and I've looked up the stats, there is a study that talked about the self-unalivement rate of Black men, and Caribbean men have the highest rate of self-unalivement in America. So when you start looking at Black men who unalive themselves, it's Caribbean men, because their culture is not adapted to deal with what we deal with here in the United States. So oftentimes when I speak, I'm going to say Madam Crimson Cure, oftentimes when I speak, I don't give this backdrop. And the reason I don't is just because I don't have time to do it. But my modus operandi has a lot to do with what I already know. See, I've done the homework. I put the homework. I grew up in what we would call a conscious community, and not one where you learn on YouTube. I was the child looking at the big wooden TV while my mother and all those folks were sitting in the kitchen, listening to Shaka Musa Barashango and Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, all these different people. I was there at those meetings, but except I was a kid watching cartoons. So I've been around it for a long time. Of course, I don't hold myself out as that, because it's become so cliche. I just consider myself studied, and at this point, at this age, I have to begin to try to do something to make a better way for our foundational Black American children with this onslaught of people coming. So that would be my two reasons why delineation is important. Number one, because we need to maintain FBA culture, because it's a matter of survival. And number two, as a practical matter, we don't want others coming in, taking what was designated from us or for us for themselves.
Okay. I'm going to get around to what's on the screen, because I think those are important things. But we're going to go to a quick commercial break. So after these messages, we'll be right back. I need everybody to go to ashkicking.com. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. If you want to keep your skin looking and feeling its absolute best, then you need the body butter that is on the screen right now. If you need to take advantage of, if this is your first order, take advantage of the 10% discount using the promo code Crimson at checkout. Once again, the link is pinned to the top of the chat, ashkicking.com. Oh, you guys are bam, 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 bam. You got to hit the like button. Bam, bam. You got to Thank you, Miss Maya, for becoming a new member. Thank you, Bruiser. How you doing, Darwin? Said great host, great guest equals valuable information. And thank you, Mogul Maze, for your support. I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody's support. So I know I ended up losing that comment that I had sort of pinned up there. Here's my thing. And now I guess I'm probably, if you wanted to characterize it, I'm probably going to come from a more emotional place and a cultural place with this conversation. I find that our delineation in this time, and for the reasons, because I think most people would agree with you for the reasoning, and because I've heard that be said over these internet streets for a while about the resources that our ancestors fought for, laws, certain benefits that have been fought for. And the issue for some of us is that the way we see it is our brethren come here, immigrate here, whether they're first generation, second generation, what have you. And the word that's usually used for this is cosplay, to adapt our talking, some aspects of our culture, the way that we move as much as possible. And then to get certain opportunities or certain benefits that are reserved for FBA or Black Americans. Get those opportunities, benefits, whatever you want to call it. And then after it's gotten, they're proud to say where they're from. Nigeria or Ghana or the Caribbean or what have you. They proudly delineate, which I have to say, I don't have a problem with nobody delineating. I don't have an issue with anyone saying, this is where I come from, this is our culture, and be proud of that. However, I'm also seeing that it's problematic to everybody else. Now that we're doing the same thing. There's a lot of pushback. And I'm not going to say everybody. I wouldn't even know whether or not I could say majority or minority. But there is pushback to us in saying you don't need to delineate because you don't really have a real culture anyways. Nobody wants to be Black. Nobody's trying to be Black with y'all because y'all are basically the bottom of the barrel.
Right.
And whenever I hear that speech, I just got to be real honest, I hear white survivalist talking points. Black people are lazy. They've been calling us lazy since they had to let us off them plantations.
Yeah.
Okay. Since our ancestors, since they had to let our ancestors off that plantation and they could no longer receive slave labor from us, we was lazy Negroes from that point, from that day to this one. We've been late. That's been the talking point. We've been lazy. We don't want to work. We just want a handout. Even when we start talking about reparations, that is even characterized as wanting a handout. Now, I've actually made some of my subscribers a little mad about my stance on reparations. I think some of them don't really get where I'm coming from. I understand that it is a debt that needs to be paid. Reparations is not something that I feel like, slavery is over. I'm not going to say that because my father was picking cotton. My dad. My mother. Not my great, my dad.
Yeah, my mother too. My mother picked cotton.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're not even going to play with that.
Right.
So it's not that far away. What, a generation or two at best, 3 maybe. But aside from that, let me try to get around to a point because I'm trying to figure out why is it viewed as vitriol and hatred coming from us now that we're doing a little bit of line drawing in the sand and saying, no, this is who we are. And we good with who we are. You can be who you are, but this is who we are. And we're good with that. We, whatever our shortcomings are as a group of people, it is what it is. But we're not going to shy away from being FBA. We're not going to shy away from being Black American. Why do you think that our brethren across the diaspora have an issue with it?
Well, let's first establish that they've already delineated from us. If you go to Jamaica and say, I'm a Jamaican, they say, no, yeah, Yankee man come down from Babylon. That's what they're gonna say. And if you go to Nigeria and say, hey, my DNA test says I'm Nigerian, say, no, my brother, you are not, you are a white man come from America. They're gonna say they've already delineated. So the problem is when we delineate, they lose resources. So when people become, and this is just general human behavior, and when people become accustomed to something that they're not entitled to, and you take it away from them, they call it hate. You see, and that's what they have been so used to coming and living under the umbrella of what we call Black America and reaping all the benefits that we have. Now that we're saying, no, we're going to close up our umbrella and we're going to move somewhere else, and we're only going to allow people who actually fall within the category of foundational Black Americans to reap the benefit of it. Then now they're angry because now they're going to have to deal with the system of white survivalism all themselves. They're no longer going to be able to say, oh, I'm Black American. No, you're going to have to say, I'm an immigrant and I'm Black. Can you imagine what they're going to have to deal with? Not only are you Black, but now you're an immigrant. So you're going to get the immigrant treatment and you're going to get the Black treatment all at once. But the problem is they don't necessarily have any standing to say anything about it. So, and I've gone through this over and over again. Black Americans or foundational Black Americans are uniquely presented as the moral compass in this country. We are the only group of people who came to this country not as immigrants, but as imports against our will. So because of that, there's nobody that can tell us rightfully, oh, you got to go back. You have an option to go back home. No, because we didn't have an option to come here. And I'm going to say something that also ticked off many of my subscribers. We were sold by our so-called African brothers and sisters for profit. In fact, that business of slave trade had been going on for 1,600 years before the first European got involved. And when they start saying things like, oh, well, they didn't know what type of slavery it was going to be as bad as it was. Slave trade to the East was so bad that they don't even exist anymore. And the reason being is because, they demasculated the men. And when children were conceived by the Arab, or children were sired by the Arab enslavers, they would oftentimes physically remove those children from those African mothers, literally while she was pregnant. This is how cruel it was. So when you say that Africans didn't know how it was, that's just the empirical evidence and the historical accounts say otherwise. In fact, even when we begin to talk about the transatlantic slave trade, there were people who participated in the transatlantic slave trade who were then made slaves, were enslaved, got their freedom, and went right back to being slave, participating in this horrible event. Now, I'm not saying that, most people, most cultures on this planet had slaves. When we look at Genghis Khan, he was a horrible man. Horrible. I mean, he's fathered millions of children. There are millions of people who've been fathered by this little small Asian man. And there's been, even on the continent, Shaka Zulu himself, he was pretty rough on people, in his consolidation of what we call South Africa. The Europeans, the French fought the Vikings fought the British, what we call the English fought the Vikings, and all four of the main kingdoms in what we call England fought each other. So it's been a lot of unalivement throughout history. But when we talk about what Africans did, and when we talk about hate, and when we talk about who's delineated, they've already delineated from us. And so why is it now that you have an issue with us delineating? We accept you at your offer, and we will now delineate from you. But again, the whole point and reason why is because they are no longer able to reap the benefit of what was something unearned gains that they had, in that hiding under the umbrella of foundational Black Americans, who, because of our historical tragedies, we're the only ones in this country who have standing to correct this country when it's off its moral compass. And now that we've decided to have a seat And in fact, I would argue that foundational Black Americans have decided to take a whole stadium full of seats, and we're allowing ICE and Donald Trump and whoever else wants to participate in the rounding up of these people, and you don't hear a peep out of Black folks. And they have a problem with that, because normally we're stepping out, and look, we will step out in front of PETA, the Rainbow Coalition, and I'm not talking about the one Jesse Jackson started. If it's a fight for rights, we're typically the first ones in line. But now at this point, we've had some arrests, and they have a problem with that because now they're forced to deal with the onslaught of the systematic white survivalism. And I'm going to tell you, white people are just saying, well, let's see how far we can go.
White people in. Yeah. I be telling people that white people, this is not a surprise to us. White people is white people in it right now. They deep off into it. They got in their bag. They done got in a white survivalist bag, and they are pulling out the stops. It's not even all the stops. It can get much worse if you let it, because they don't take their foot off the gas. They actually don't take their foot off of the gas. So all of this ICE situation, I think that's a part of the side eye that we're getting, because it's like, well, we're all Black, so why aren't you stepping up and saying something? Because if you don't say anything, you're going to be next. And my response to that is maybe yes, maybe no, but we already know who they are. We already understand who they are. We know what they try to do. We know the stuff that they try to get away with and try to do to whole groups of people. This is a group of people that has historically colonized every place that they have set their feet.
Right.
So we cannot forget the history of the people that we're talking about. I want to address this comment on the screen here. Delineation is fine, but you also have to delineate from white folks to keep it consistent. What do that even mean?
Well, I think
what do that? Hold on for 1 second. Let me look. What do that even mean, man? Delineate from white folk. What are they white? We already know who they are. So what do you mean by that? Like what is the purpose of that statement? And it's statements like that I try to keep an even keel, because I don't have any rancor towards anybody. But at the same time, don't be shooting at us because we saying what we saying.
Right.
Don't aim your gun, because all of y'all collectively stand up to beat your chest about where you come from, what your how much superior your culture is to ours. And you beat your chest about how superior you are to us, period, across the board. You let y'all tell it. You smarter than us, you work harder than us, you make more money than us, and all of that. So I don't like the shooting that get done, because it's really unnecessary. That's where the vitriol is coming from, in my opinion. It's just unnecessary, because if we're saying, you know what, this is what our ancestors fought for, and we're going to try to make the most of that and benefit from that as much as possible, how anybody going to be mad that's what we're doing? And then when we retaliate and get smart with y'all, when we roast y'all, when we turn around and bite your head off about it, then all of a sudden we should have took the high road, and all of us are Black, and we shouldn't be divisive. And I think that's the part that gets me a little bit. I don't like that aspect of it. You know, we're all together when we stand up and say, I don't like how we being talked to or about. And when we say that, it's like, oh, well, you know, we all Black, right? Why y'all coming at us trying to divide with us? because I don't necessarily see the camaraderie and the togetherness in the first place. Not necessarily if it on a superficial level sometimes, but not in depth. I don't like it. I have to say that I don't like it. And you know, I'm not gonna take up. I know I went on a little bit of a rant, so my apologies for my rant. But that's just how I feel about it sometimes, because we are who we are. And y'all are who y'all are. And it's fine. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. I don't mind learning about the cultures across the diaspora. I don't mind about that. I don't mind nobody speaking a language or being proud of nothing that they got going on. But don't come over here and start shooting. Don't come over here and start shooting because we're saying we're FBA. This is what it is. Our ancestors died on this land. I don't care how y'all want to say we came over here or was brought over here or what happened. From my father on back, bones is buried in this land. That's where they are. So this is my land by right and by blood. So if they had to die in order for the small amount of benefit and the rights to come to us, then it is what it is. Now, if you want to come over here and you've benefited from it, we just started this delineation talk heavy just the last couple of years.
Yep.
This ain't even been a full decade from where I have understood of just really talking about it and really defining these terms and these concepts. I'm sorry, this did not end in a question for you.
No, but I can pick up where they always say how much better they're doing than foundational Black Americans, but when you actually look at the reports, they always, when I say they, I'm talking about African immigrants and Caribbean immigrants. Typically, when they come to this country, they live in the impoverished neighborhoods with Black people who are poor. They don't compare their top 10% to the top 10% of foundational Black Americans. And when you actually do the study, the average top 10% Caribbean makes anywhere from $60,000 to $70,000 a year. The average African makes anywhere from $70,000 to $90,000 a year, more or less. But the average top 10% foundational Black Americans, we make well above $100,000. So we're blowing them out the water. Now, when you compare their top 10% to the average Black man and Black woman who's just doing the best they can to get by, of course there's going to be a disadvantage. But remember, a lot of the Caribbeans and the Africans who are able to afford to come to this country are in the upper echelons of the countries they live in. So they have a support system. They have education. Many of the Nigerians who come to this country already have degrees from their African-based colleges. And then they come to the United States and they repeat that degree attainment process. So they already have an advantage. But again, when they compare themselves to those of us who are here, we own more land than they do. We're more politically, I would say, connected. We have more positions of power and authority. And it only makes sense because this is our country. So a lot of what they say is rhetoric. Now, one thing I want to talk about, because you mentioned this earlier, is that we have to also take into account the remittance, because it's not just the Africans and the Caribbeans who have a problem with foundational Black Americans delineating. It's also their governments. And it makes sense when you consider that $20 billion went back to Nigeria last year, $20 billion. So a large percentage, actually $20.93 billion was, and that's 8.9% of their gross national product. That was in 2024. And when we talk about countries like Jamaica, the reason they want that $3.71 billion is sent back to their economy in remittance. One of the reasons why Donald Trump signed that executive order saying there will be a tax on remittance is to begin to shut it down. Now, I want you to consider something, Crimson Cure. We always talk about recycling Black dollars. But what happens when you go to that African or Nigerian based store or restaurant, or that African doctor. And look, let me tell you something. Let me just say this. I got much love for Caribbean and African people. I love you. I love you. And I'm extremely disappointed in you. And I think I can speak on behalf of most foundational Black. We don't hate you. We're just extremely disappointed at your behavior and your rhetoric and the disrespect. I think that's what it comes down to. But as a practical matter, if you have a group of people who are sending a large percent, they're Black, but they're sending a large percentage of their income to a foreign country, it's not recirculating in the Black community. You're not going to build up businesses and communities and schools in the Black community. Your money's going to Nigeria to build that house. Your money's going to Africa or Trinidad to build that school down there or pay for grandma or whomever else. It's not. So as a practical matter, if we want to recycle Black dollars, it makes sense for us to focus on foundational Black Americans and their businesses and their in our own economies, because the money leaves the country otherwise. So that's something else to think about. Again, you mentioned the term cosplay, and and I'm going to say this, and this is going to sound, it's a biological term, biology based. If you have an organism that is reaping a benefit from you and not giving anything back, that's called a parasite. And what we see happening is a lot of African Caribbeans are coming to this country and they're leeching off the success of foundational Black Americans, and we're not reaping the benefit. They marry within their own families. They go to church within their own families. They specifically tell their sons and daughters, hey, don't marry, don't deal with those Black Americans. So it's not like they're coming over here and fusing themselves into the culture and making it better. They're literally taking resources, they're taking time, they're taking space, they're taking energy away from us. And what does it do for us? Nothing, because at the end of the day, we get their trash. When I say trash, we get the dope dealers, we get the criminals. They say, oh, those Black people are committing crimes over in New York. But they get the flags come out when somebody graduates from medical school. The flags come out when somebody gets accepted to 13 different Ivy League universities. The flag comes out when somebody says, I'm the newest millionaire. So that's just something else to think about.
Yeah. Just to sort of, I've been picking comments out of the comment section because I think some of them are important to address. So because we're, and Thanos, thank you, Thanos. So Thanos says, because we're supposed to be doormats, since Mr. Cartwright plays in our face, they think they should be able to as well. And unfortunately, there is an aspect of truth to that, I think, underlying, subconscious, sometimes not spoken, that we're supposed to take what we deem as disrespect let me go back to something that you said when you said disappointed. I think for me personally, part of the disappointment is tied into what Thanos just said. We expect white people to do a certain thing.
Right.
White people gone white people. We know that already. But people that look like us, that come here and what I'm saying, it's all cool, we laughing, we chilling together, this, that, and the third. The disappointment comes in when I hear white people's rhetoric come out their mouth towards us. And it's like, and we know where you got it from. That's why it's disrespectful. Because we have heard those things ad nauseum. The main one that like to get said, and I'll repeat it, is Black people are lazy, don't want to work, and they want handouts. That has been, I don't think y'all know that because y'all come over here. I don't think y'all know how long white people been saying that about us and how long we've heard that. That has been a slander on us forever. So when we hear it, we know where it comes from. That's why we be giving a whole side eye like, why you saying it? We know why white people say it. Why are you saying that? You know what I'm saying? When you can see us, you live around us for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that plays a part in it too, the living around us, because sometimes when they come here, you know, they're placed in the hood. And in the hood, that's the lowest part of us. That's the bottom of us. That's the lowest rung of us. You know, when you're around the projects, when you see, you know, people engaged in maybe illegal activity or saying, "Hey, how you doing, sweetening?"
It's my oldest son. This is my oldest son. Then he just came home from work.
Oh, there you
Everybody.
go. How you doing, sweetheart?
He's an engineering student at U of H.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, he
Big
wants
brain.
build
There we are.
bridges and overpasses and whatnot. So
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Okay.
I'm praying you do well, sweetheart.
All right. Daddy's big baby. All right. Okay. He just got home. I hadn't seen him all day. So I just,
okay.
Yeah.
See, I love that. I love that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm gonna wrap this up because I said that we would.
We got a little time. The little basketball practice for the other one starts at 7. So I got a little. He ain't doing nothing but hacking and fouling out there anyway. He's hacking and
not hacking and fouling.
Hacking and fouling. That's all he does. Hacking and fouling. I'm like, boy, this is not. But you know, like I said, sister, I don't have a problem with Caribbeans or Africans. I mean, you know, when you start looking deep into our history, most of the Africans who ended up in this country spent some time in the Caribbean in the seasoning farms down there. They didn't just bring them straight over here from Africa because that was a little too wild for them, you see. And when you start looking at the migration patterns between what used to be Spain or France and Haiti and all those, a lot of people from New Orleans, they all have this. We all have that intermixture, but the problem becomes when they began to take advantage of the opportunities we have bled for in this country. And I'm looking at your comment section, and some of you all recognize that I'm the one. I'm the one who's, after doing my research, because you know, about 6 years ago, people asked me to do some research on reparations and how we can get this money out of these folk. And so the further I began to dig, the more I began to realize that Africa and many of the African, what we call the nations at the time, were culprits. They were co-conspirators with the Europeans. And so I said, well, you know, to me, it seems as though we need to go ahead and file a lawsuit and bring, or at least get an amendment or a change in the law that gives us standing to sue some of these African nations for their part. Now that, of course, was not popular at the time because, see, we still had this hunky-dory, let's all go along to get along. But now at this point, since many foundational Black Americans having interacted with Africans, having interacted with more Caribbeans, because remember, now we're at 25% of the Black population in the United States is either African or Caribbean, first generation or second generation. So we're getting to know these folk. They're not just a novelty. See, now when you go to the Juneteenth concert, you got curry goat, you know, eating, and you got some, you know, Afro beats being played as opposed to Al Green.
Essence Fest.
Exactly. So there's more. And you said something earlier, and I want to jump behind that. We know who white folks are, and they know who we are. I've gone through a lot of different true history about Black people, and we've always resisted. And it wasn't a we shall overcome style resistance. We took up arms, we fought. Black men and Black women fought side by side. There was 500 Black people tried to march on New Orleans and destroy. We fought, whether we're talking about the Deacons of Defense for Justice down in North Louisiana. We've always fought. This is who we are. This is the history that they don't know about. This is the history they say, oh, you all are always begging. No, we fought. Just like there was the paradox between Brother Malcolm and Brother Martin. Hey, you know, we like to be able to be peaceful, but if we can't, then we will, use arms and feet and hands and elbows and toes to get our point across. But it's because of our willingness to lay it all on the line, but only for reasonable reasons, not just, crazy throwing our life away type stuff. It's because we actually gained a certain level of respect from white people. Now, look, let me say this, okay? And I know the type of
what you
we
mean by that. People would take that and run with that.
Yeah.
But I get what I'm gonna let you explain it. I'm gonna let you do it. But I get what you mean by that. It's almost like, all right, y'all, we see you. We don't like y'all. We still gonna do what we gonna do, but we know y'all will come kind of bust our head too. So
you're not
fight you, we gonna have to fight.
You're not gonna deport us. We're not going anywhere. All. See, this is the difference between Black Americans and the rest of you folks. They're not good. Let me look right up in here in my little bloodshot eye. They are not going to deport us because they can't. There was a war fought for 40 years. Lincoln referred to it as the Florida problem. Well, what happened was a bunch of Black folks left South Carolina and Georgia and some parts of Florida and Alabama, and they ran down to them swamps in Florida. And they sent the United States military for decades, and they couldn't do anything with, I believe it was 30,000 Black folks who were uneducated, unarmed, and isolated. What do you think they're going to do with 30 million or 40 million Black people who refuse to go? We would literally tear this country apart. Them trying to send us, we're not going anywhere.
At the seams, brick by brick, it would go. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
that's not gonna be whatever they do. That's not gonna be something they can pull with us. They're gonna have to pull something else out the hat.
And they know that, and they know that, and we know that. And as I said all the time, Black people and white people, and I'm talking about the real white folk. I'm not talking about these fresh ones that's just come up from Venezuela and whatnot. And I'm not talking about the ones that just got here. I'm not talking about the new Black folk from Jamaica. I'm talking about Black Americans who can trace their heritage back to Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, all those other states down there. We have an understanding. Black Americans and white Americans have an understanding, not necessarily that we like each other and we're at peace, even though we get along together, we play football together, we play basketball together, we work together. We have an understanding, and they know just how far to push us. And we know just how far we go with them. We don't necessarily invade on their spaces. We leave white folk alone. The typical foundational Black American is not trying to run up and hang out with white folks at the country and western.
Not trying to join their little country clubs and all of that.
Right. And I'm gonna go so far as to tell you what I tell my own sons. My preference is that you marry a woman of African descent. And I tell them that to their face with all this multiculturalism and date who you want to date. My preference is that they marry women of African descent, specifically foundational Black American women. But if they decide to date a woman of African descent and Caribbean, I'm cool with that. My preference for my Black sons is to date and marry Black women. It don't matter if she is from Trinidad or Caribbean or Alabama or wherever. That's my preference because I love my people and I love my Black skin and I love my Blackness, and I infuse that in my sons, and I go out of my way to be a good mentor and role model for my sons and hold myself out in a moral and upright manner so that they will love their Blackness and love being a Black man. And when you're dealing with Black men like me and Black women who have these same sentiments, white folks understand. As long as you Caribbeans and Africans continue to be sycophants and butt kissers, you're not going to ever garner the respect that you think you're supposed to get. And you will never replace us because they will always see you as less than and cowards and people they can easily push around. You're just not going to do that with us. You see, that's my point. But go ahead.
No. I'm actually glad that you was able to say that. Would that count as your final thoughts, or do you want to give us a little bit more before we go?
Well, I mean, I got time. Like I said,
you got more time than I do, actually.
Okay, well, yeah, look, like I said earlier, I have great respect for you. I don't really do a whole lot of, other stuff. You know what I mean? Just because
No,
I bring a lot of heat. As people hate me, they mad at me. He's doing this person. He said that's what I do. I do everybody.
They be mad with you with them lawsuits, brother Dennis. They be mad with you in them comments.
I know they do. And here's the cold part about it. Just like I could get this. Hold on a minute. Let me get somebody down.
They be mad with you. I see
but
that, brother.
I can tell you. Let me tell you. I don't care.
That's the funny part.
Yeah. That's the cold. The cold part about it is I don't care. I think they realize I don't care. And here comes somebody else to tell you, come here. Does Daddy care? Does Daddy care at all? No. Tell him, does Daddy care? Does Daddy care what people think at all about Daddy? No. Does Daddy care if you sad or upset? Do I care? Tell him like
no.
No, I don't.
He said no. He said that with his chest too.
yeah. No, I don't. He got to go to a little basketball. We ready for the basketball. Yeah, right now. What do you think? Tomorrow? Come get on out of here. Hacking and filing. But what I'm trying to say, look, this is my time to shine. Get on up out of here. He's putting his little head in here. You need to brush your hair. We working on, body odor around here. That's what boys, ladies, let me get to the point of personal privilege. If you have sons, okay, let's work on that. Let's work on the body odor. Let's make sure we get that together, because you're not gonna have. I tell them, you ain't gonna have a good looking woman with bad breath and hot breath and stinky armpits, brother. But anyway, so nevertheless. But what? Let me get back. So golly, I don't really care what they think, because I understand that my legacy is more important than what people think right now. Because see, let me tell you something. They've been hating me for a long time, and now people are just starting to realize just how reasonable I have been. I remember a few years back, there was this whole passport bro movement. And our sisters were saying, these brothers are going here and he's doing all this passport bro stuff. And I said, you all must not be well read. There's a book out there that talks about how Black American women are traveling down to some other countries doing some things they shouldn't be doing. I brought that up. I'm the one. The Pursuit of Happiness is the name of the book. And the reason I know about it is because at the time, my fiance, who's now my wife, was studying that book, because they actually study it in those Ivy League universities. They study what Black folk are doing with your body parts in the American studies. This is what they're doing. And that's how I knew about it. And I'm like, my gosh, I thought that was amazing. Another thing, when I first became, I had maybe 5,000 or 6,000 followers. You had this whole educated lane versus what do they call it? Pookie and Ray Ray. And so the Pookie and Ray Ray brothers, the street brothers, said, y'all just jealous of us because, the ladies like us, you see? And I said some things that were very unpopular. I said, basically, you are, you're degenerates. You're bringing our women down. You're bringing our career down, bringing our culture down. And you deserve nothing but the D word, And I got that from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who said that back in the 1990s, who said there's going to come a time and a place where you're going to be taken in the street and taken out. You see what I'm saying? So, and I recognize that, and that's what's necessary. But anyway, that ended the Pookie and Ray Ray educated lame wars, because now you got this somebody who's supposed to be an educated lame who is from what we would call the hood, born and raised in South Central Los Angeles.
So glad you said that, Dennis. I be trying to put that in words. That whole, I don't like how we as Black people characterize certain things. I don't like it. Educated lame was supposed to be these guys that weren't very masculine,
right? That
were kind of just these geeky, nerdy, I can't get women type of guys. And I have always said a lot of our very astute brothers, intelligent brothers, they out the hood. A lot of them brothers are from the hood. They're not criminals. They are not lowbrow men. They just happen to grow up in an impoverished situation. And then they came from that situation and said, you know what? I'm still a man, and I'm gonna move in this world like a man. Seeing you and men like my older brother, who I've always cherished. I mean, we was in the hood, west side of Chicago, nothing but gangs and drugs and police, nothing but that. And he's like a Renaissance man. He speaks a couple of languages fluently. He, you know what I'm saying? He's that guy. Always, but he's always been super intelligent. Always in the honors, always in the Kiwanis Club, always, you know what I'm saying, getting honors everywhere that he went. Very well spoken, very well groomed, very good looking, very, you know what I'm saying, very presentable. You would not know that he came from the hood unless you try him. Now, if you try him, the west side of Chicago gonna come out. And then you're going to be surprised. Like, wait a minute. Well, I thought, no, you thought wrong, because you thought you was going to come over here and act like I was some type of punk just because I got a suit on and I'm speaking properly to you.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that because that exists. That's who a lot of our men are.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, my son's, that oldest boy of mine, he is into computers and building bridges, and he spends his time on the computer building houses at night. Like, he sits up to 2 o'clock in the morning creating homes like an architect. But, there is a need for balance. And I do respect the some aspects of what I had to deal with as a young man growing up in South Central Los Angeles. You got to be tough. But there are ways in which we can instill that mental toughness and physical toughness in our sons without having to put them through the gauntlet and the traumatic experiences associated with ghetto life. You shouldn't have to grow up watching a strawberry perform some sort of act on some John in the backseat of a Ford Nova,
Not a Nova. You done went all the way back.
Yeah.
Do they? I don't even think they know what Nova is.
Yeah, they shouldn't have to be shooting craps at 10 years old with the homeboys down the street of the Blue Rag affiliation to have a little street smart stuff that I did. You see? So at the same age, my little boy is 9. At 10 years old, I was shooting craps with the we'll call it the neighborhood representatives down the street. And you would wonder, where is the supervision? Where is this? Nevertheless, it taught me street smarts. Now, I'm not going to say that my sons have that level of street smart, but they could definitely handle themselves.
Right.
And not only just learning how to box from your uncle. I mean, they have multiple black belt degrees, jiu-jitsu, they just got their second degree in Shotokan. They take Muay Thai. So they've been in combat sports since they were 4 and 7 years old, respectively. And I'm still working on the little short light skin where he's about soft as a cotton swab, but he likes football. But what I'm trying to say is we can make our boys tough. We can make them men
without trauma,
without all the unnecessary trauma and the brutality.
That's the important part.
Because we do want well-rounded men. I will say this: I've never had an issue with women. Black women. I've never had an issue, and my masculinity is transferable. In other words, whether I'm in Colombia or Jamaica or America, whether I'm talking to women of whatever ethnicity, whether I'm in New York City or somewhere in Brazil, women like masculine men. And I carry myself in that regard. I've never had issues with attracting women. So it's not about your education. And the biggest, cruelest trick that the white survivalist system played on us is basically pathologizing being intelligent, being brilliant, being educated as though this was something that we should run away from, because our ancestors literally died because they wanted to learn how to read. And I think we do ourselves a disservice by not pushing education amongst our own people. And, to bring it all back, we have a very beautiful and diverse culture, foundational Black Americans. And the more you study it, the more you realize just how amazing it is to be surrounded in a sea of chaos and destruction and be an island of civility. And we are blessed to be where we are. We are blessed as a people. God clearly loves us, because for us to have survived for this long and actually thrive, we got 1.7 million millionaires. We have more millionaires than the whole country of Mexico. We have more millionaires, and I'm talking about Black folk, have more millionaires in America than Africa has in all 54 countries. And so, you know, I love my people. I love our people. And, you know, that's about all I got to say.
All right, then. You like I told you before, I cheese and smile when your baby is on camera and everything. I am so glad to hear he gonna be an engineer. You know, when I was young, I thought I would be an architect at one point. That didn't happen. But I'm glad that he's doing the engineer thing. Like, that puts a smile on my face, because we need more of those. I mean, knowing how to build from the ground up and understanding how it must be built is an awesome skill that can go anywhere. He not only can he, make so much money being an engineer, just if he had to do that for himself on his own, he could do it. It's just knowledge. Once you get it, they can't take it and you can't do nothing with it. It's just here. I don't know that I have a whole lot to add other than the rest of the super chats. Thank you. Kisei said the Essence Fest this year is a good example showing the Black American community, FBA, ADOS, or whatever we name ourselves, is dying out. That whole Essence Fest, I didn't deep dive into it because I've never gone to the Essence Fest, but to hear how it was spoken of this year, and then a Pink Book Lessons did a really good job of kind of going in depth about what the issue was. Having a jollof rice competition at Essence Fest was egregious.
Yeah.
And I like jollof rice, but come on, not at the Essence Fest.
Yeah, I lived in Louisiana from 1992 all the way up to 2005. And I went to Grambling, I went to Southern, which is in Baton Rouge. Grambling's in North Louisiana, and I went to Tulane. You know, my first wife was from New Orleans, Ninth Ward Hardhead. You see what I'm saying? So it's just disrespectful for you to come to New Orleans and then bring some outside food and not partake in what New Orleans is and what Louisiana is in general. It is one of our cultural centers as foundational Black Americans. And I just find it disrespectful. And the idea that you would, and here's the thing, if you're going to bring African culture to New Orleans, then go ahead and spend some money. Go ahead and get, what's that young man that sings those Afro beats, the real popular young man, I forget his name. Bring one of those famous Afrobeat artists over, and let them perform. Don't come in here with the jollof rice. Go spend a couple $1 million and have them perform on the stage so we can see them for who they are. Not sneak your way in through it the cheap way. You can't do that to us and think we're not gonna notice.
We're not supposed to say anything for that. Thank you, Chris. The FBAs are of Shemitic descent, not Hamitic. Thank you, Ross. America has always delineated from your low self-esteem, but so why do you identify with it and not those that share your blood? Thank you for the contribution, but for real, again, what do this even supposed to mean?
I think it's an attempt to do an insult. Basically, why don't you do that to the white man? Why don't you scared? No, we're gonna keep doing what we've been doing, and y'all gonna go about your business. You're gonna learn this lesson, and then once you come out of this gauntlet of pain and suffering and degradation, then we can have a conversation. See, sometimes my grandmother used to say, "The world can teach you better than I can tell you." And once you get through with this butt whooping in about 10, 15 years, after they get through running you over the coals and you come out raggedy and dusty, then we'll come out the other side and see if we tried to tell you. Okay, now that your children are over incarcerated and they've stripped all those little degrees didn't mean anything because you had education without power. Now you see what we're talking about. Because see, here's the thing: white folk throw tantrums about every 20 or 30 years. We saw
they do. They in the midst of one right now.
2019, we saw it after Reconstruction, and white folk came and got their stuff back. And they put all the Black people back in their place. We saw it after 1965 when we made all that progress. They said, just drop the dope on them. You see them, and let's go ahead and put them in jail. And now you see it happening again. About every 20, 30 years, white folk throw a tantrum and they begin to take back everything which they gave to you. Okay, so you all have to understand that working harder, and if you don't mind me saying, somebody type work harder in the just work harder in the chat room. Just working harder is not gonna always work. That's what you need to understand. It's a lot of black people who in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who worked really hard to have those properties. There's a lot of black people in Rosewood. There was a lot of black people in Colfax, Louisiana, and all over the South. In 1990, they worked real hard to get all those things, and white folk got jealous and came back and took it all back. You understand? As I say, the Lord giveth and the devil come and take it away. Hallelujah. So I want y'all to understand. So y'all keep working harder. Y'all keep working harder. Praise God. Excuse me, Lane.
Oh no, he got you all together real quick. Thank you, Fear to None, for your super sticker. I appreciate you. Thank you, Jason. So they call slaves lazy as they slaved away to the average age death of 26 years for the men. Thank you, Scarcities, said the American Indian will rise again. Thank you, Leah, said hi, Crimson and Dennis. Could you create a vetted group chat for single seeking marriage and family like KS's group where Dennis met his wife? I missed it, and this would help us find like-minded partners. Thank you for that, Leah. That might be something to think about.
You know what? That young lady came to my page the other day, and and she said the same thing to me. I'm like, I ain't trying to deal with all these people. But I'm not about to sit up here and play matchmaker for these beginnings. You know what I'm saying? But again, I never had problems with women. I've never had issues. You know, I go about my business being the best man I can be, working hard, and these sort of things, and try to stay in some reasonable shape and just being myself. But, you know, I'm 6'4", you know, I've been pretty handsome most of my life, you know, most of the time. But I think that, I don't know, that would be something we'd have to talk about, you know. But I would, look, I'm not going to just vet you. I'm going to vet your family. I want to see who raised you. You don't want me being the vet. I'm going to get on the internet. Let me see. Warrant for your arrest. You can't come in my group. So I'd have to think about that. But,
wow. Okay. All right. You know what? Let me wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for coming through. I want to. My husband said salute to you, Mr.
Salute
Dennis.
to your brother, man. My wife just walked in right now from the courthouse. She's a prosecutor.
Okay. All right. A house of attorneys. They better not do nothing wrong in that house, baby. Be on white on rice.
Here's another thing. I got her when I first met. I said, "You're gonna have to learn how to fight around here." So she started doing jujitsu, Shotokan, and Muay Thai. So she been around here damn near putting me to sleep sometime. You choked out. I'm like, hold on a minute.
I'm like, wait a minute, it might have taught you too good now.
Yeah. So I love it. I love what I'm doing. God has been good. And shout out to the late great Kevin Samuels. The brother was, you know, I think he was misunderstood at the time he passed, but I think people are starting to realize, hold on a minute. And I think you had something up. But and I appreciate you because I remember you definitely took time to really analyze what the brother was trying to do. He really cared about black people. He wanted to see us win. So shout out to you too.
And shout out to everybody. I want to thank you, Brother Dennis. We may have another conversation later on. So I'm going to tap you for another conversation soon. But I do want to thank you for lending us your time and your expertise and your thoughts today. I greatly appreciate that. I greatly appreciate you, and I'm honored by your presence here. But so jump down in the comment section. Let me know what you think. Like, share, subscribe to the channel if you have not. Once again, I'm your host, is the Crimson Cure, and this was my perspective. Bye-bye, Crimsonites.